I think that's, if you get any takeaway from this, if anything we're saying kind of correlates to a situation you might find yourself in, like take a minute to take a break from it and take a step away from it and try and break that cycle. And, and it took a lot of guts, because it's easy to, it sounds weird, but it's easy to keep hurting people,
For sure.
to just keep that cycle, it perpetuates. So.
Welcome to the Lionz Den, episode 32. Again, my name's Eddy.
I'm Brad.
This is Alex.
So, if you have the YouTube, we're laughing about our hats.
Bullshit.
Hats,
It is
guys.
such bullshit.
Because Alex has his little Irish boy hat, and he's upset that I have my newsboy hat that I've had for like 5-6 years now.
Yeah. His handmade in England and...
Oldest English hattery in the world. I take that back.
And I'm rocking my brand new Scally hat, so I was super excited to break out. And then... you just don't watch the fucking YouTube this week. Just listen to the podcast.
Boston.
Listen to the podcast. Just listen to the fucking podcast.
What's the name of the hat company?
Boston Scally Company. Yeah. So this episode on Lionz Den.
But it's Italian.
Sponsored.
No, I didn't say that.
You said everybody says.
No. I said
Italian.
people make a comment like that looks like an Italian hat, and I'm not going to fucking correct them and say, no, it's made for Irish. I'm just fucking going to rock with it. Huge difference.
So none of this has anything to do with today's topic.
At all.
You guys are both
It depends, because
Very
this has been 30 minutes of this browbeating about my hat. So the topic is...
hurt people.
Right.
It's obviously a little play on words. Actually, it's kind of strange because I've never really heard it before. I mean, the concept I've obviously heard about, but it kind of came up in 3 different times over the last 2 weeks. A couple of them were in articles, and then we talked about it a little bit, the whole Will Smith thing. He was with Trevor Noah, and he made the quote. He said it, it's an old quote. And then I happened to be reading something else, and it came up again. So I was like, it's kind of weird. It keeps coming up. Just thought it was a good topic. So I'll slow down with it, with the punctuation. Hurt people. So it sounds super simple, but when you write it down, you're like, okay, it just kind of rambles in together. And there's a lot of different aspects to this and a lot of different reasons why it's kind of important to talk about. And I'm trying to think of how to explain it without sounding like an idiot. But basically, people that have been hurt in points in their life, or could be as a child, could be as an adult, whatever, are the ones hurting people. So if you're getting hurt by somebody, it's not just random. Usually they were hurt by someone, hence hurting you.
Coping method.
Right. And when Will Smith was talking about it, I mean, by no means was he trying to make any excuses for the dumbass shit he did. He was just saying that, he's been through stuff in his life, and unfortunately that's the end result of it, that when you're hurt, you hurt other people. And again, we'll kind of go through the different segments of it. I think it's important to recognize, and honestly, so this is a topic I have a difficult time with, because I know a lot of those people. I've been that person. There's times where I'm still that person. But I also have a weird fuse with it. So it's one of those things that piss me off pretty quick, even though I understand it. It's like, let's say, God forbid somebody was molested as a child. And I mean, we hear it all the time with all these serial killers. I mean, vast majority of times that was kind of their upbringing, and they become these maniacs. So you have like these traumatic experiences as a child. Actually, even from gangbanging and all that, a lot of them came from busted backgrounds, and, kind of led them to the life they're leading. So, certainly want to have compassion for that. And that's kind of like the first segment of that is the empathy. of understanding that, hey, if this person is doing this, something probably happened to them at some point in time as to got them to this point. Where I have a lot of difficulty with it is I have empathy, and then there's certain things where I'm like, you know what, I really don't care. So, for example, God forbid, poor kid was molested as a child and grows up and molests children.
Yeah, right.
I don't care that happened to you. Like, it's not okay with me that because it happened to you, you're doing it to somebody else. In fact, I think you're even a worse person than that person because you know exactly what that feels like, exactly what you went through, and you're doing it to somebody else.
And the cycle. Right.
So a really difficult time with this subject. That's why I thought it was important to talk about. Whenever we're talking about faith, and so, let me be crystal clear, this isn't okay with God, and definitely isn't okay with Jesus. I mean, it's all about forgiveness and understanding and compassion and empathy. So this is, like, when we talk about faith, is my struggle, and we're all in the same boat to different degrees, but it's important to discuss because it's things you feel. And I'll also say there's the other end of it where the empathy can almost go too far, where you're putting yourself in danger or you're getting hurt because you're empathetic to that person being hurt. And I probably should say, the reason why it hit so close and I get so ticked off about it is that's kind of how it was with my old man.
Right.
Seeing that, him kind of doing that to himself and knowing he's a good guy and, knowing he didn't really mean to hurt anybody, yet he is, you have a lot of empathy there and, compassion and, hey, you can get better. I can help you with this. And, you have them times where he's better, times where it got worse, and obviously got a lot worse. So you kind of become a cheerleader for that person because they've been through some stuff. So, all right, somebody hurt this person. That's why they're hurting other people.
Right.
You can get down a dark road with that personally because key word there, they've been hurt, so they're hurting, which means if you're in that line of fire, you're the one getting hurt.
Right.
So there's a lot of different aspects to that. I'll let you kind of jump in, Brad.
It's almost, kind of what you're explaining. It's almost like the playground bully, right?
Right.
Goes home, has issues at home, gets yelled at. Mom or dad or somebody at home is taking their bad day out on, his kid or whatever. He comes to the playground and he has to continue that cycle. For you could have just as easily gone down the same path as your dad. Like there's a lot of people that do. I saw what we're talking about a lot when I was like trying to date. You learn there are, and even for me, I had a relationship that went really, really bad. And you try and fix it by, well, I'm going to go date or I'm going to go meet somebody new or whatever, but you have this hurt, and unknowingly sometimes you project that on other people. You have this pent up angst, and it's this cycle that then you do it to somebody, then that person, it's this domino effect that just continues and continues. And, before you know it, the dating pool is really just a lot of people just hurting each other.
Right.
Which I found to be really quite accurate. But you learn through faith, and like you said, you kind of get to a point where you're like, enough is enough.
Right.
And it's not it's a difficult journey to get to that point. But when you're able to be like, I don't want to hurt people, you're realizing you're hurting people. And then you start to also see the signs of hurt people. In my case, I just started to avoid those people. But it took a while to get there because you also want to, like you said, you want to be the hero.
Right.
And I would, there were people that I was interested in that you could tell were hurt. Like, let me save you. Let me help you, and if they're not ready, there's nothing you can do, at that point. So it's a great topic, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, for me, I touched on it, I think, 3 episodes ago, that trying to help somebody who is hurting, you have to be in a pretty solid spot yourself mentally to be able to help somebody walk through some of those things. And even then, it's quite a bit of a ride. So I think it's perfect. The play on words is fun. Hurt people because I think people genuinely want to help. Not that they necessarily look at it like it's a charity case, but it's human nature to do the right thing, especially if you're in tune with yourself and trying to be a better person.
Or especially if there's an engagement there, meaning relationship or friendship or family or any of that. That ties you in even more because there's a reciprocation there.
No, I mean, that's exactly what I was going to say. Exactly. So yeah, I think it's a good thing that we talk about it, because I don't think as many people realize that a lot of interactions go down this way.
No doubt about it. I mean, it's always at the essence of any type of pain caused by somebody else. Usually that happens to that person and they're doing that to themselves. And to Brad's point, a lot of times you could be unaware. I think when you were going through your thing, Brad, I think there was a definite, genuine fear of a real connection, because having that real connection again means you can lose that again.
Yep.
So that's kind of like the hurt you were going through and the hurt you might put on somebody else because you're walking away from a situation too early because, oh, wait a second, I'm not getting hurt like that again.
Right.
The danger with that is just like we're talking about, you're doing damage to somebody else, you're doing damage to yourself. So, I mean, a good example of that, last dog I had was my life, been through hell and back. When I put it down, I was in depression for months. And I know people to this day that refuse to get a dog again because of going through that. We got another dog a little later. Well, actually, we had it at that time. And my dog's incredible. I couldn't imagine not being without it. So it's one of those things that you want to be aware of, because that hurt can prevent you from a lot of great experiences. It will prevent you. It's not a can. It will prevent you from a lot of good experiences. And it can also put you in, danger. And it's not just physical. I mean, a lot of times it's emotional danger. Right. Because again, wanting to be that savior or wanting to reciprocate or, any of those type of things, I really care about this person. I mean, my father's a perfect example. He's my old man. I loved him to death. I wanted him to get better. So you just kind of, you attach yourself to them and you're getting dragged through all that because you want to see them do better. And I guess the real point of this is a bunch of different things. One is you don't have to do that. To Brad's point earlier, you're not changing anybody that doesn't want to be changed. Right. And you're not helping anybody that doesn't want to be helped. And we kind of talked about this quite a few times. Get behind me, Satan. Right. So there's a point where it doesn't matter how much you care about that person, how much you love that person, how important that person is to you. When they're self-destructive, you have to remove yourself from that. It's just that simple. Right. Jesus did it, so you can do it. Doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't mean you don't care, doesn't mean that person isn't important to you. And that's not to say to slam the door on that person. When I look back with stuff with my dad, I should have walked away from it years and years and years before I did. And again, you leave the door open, but where I eventually got to him is I don't want to have a relationship with you the way you are.
Right.
You're drunk. You get in trouble, make me feel like crap. It's depressing seeing you. It's depressing seeing how you live your life. Makes me feel shitty, makes my life feel shitty, and I don't want to be subject to it. And I don't have to be.
Right.
You're my old man, and thank you for life, but it's time to press on.
Right.
If you decide to change your life, you decide to get better,
right.
My door's open. Until then, I'm moving forward. Get behind me, Satan.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really, really, really hard for people to do. The danger in that is it's really, really, really hurtful to stay in it.
Right.
And hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you're getting hurt, the more you're kind of getting tumbled through is where you end up doing it to somebody else.
Chain reaction.
Because it's just kind of inevitable.
Mm-hmm.
And looking at my dad, I see the relationships I was in after. I was always kind of in that wounded bird thing where I didn't win it with my old man, so I'm going to win it on this one.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I always kind of put myself in relationships that might not have been the best for me because, love's going to rule all eventually.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to win this one eventually, and it just kind of puts you in that danger zone.
Mm-hmm.
I think even my current situation, like my relationship is great, and but there was a point early on that I remember like talking, distinctly talking to you, and you having to kind of like break that cycle for me of like, well, hang on a minute, let's slow this down, like what, and it was almost one of those like epiphany moments of where you're like, okay, what am I doing here? What is the end goal? Do I continue this cycle of hurt people, or do I, do we suck it up and try and break it? It's a difficult thing when you're in it.
Sure.
To realize, well, I'm in this. It's not getting me anywhere. I need to break this cycle. And fortunately I did. And, it's obviously things have been amazing since doing so. And the biggest thing that I would like to get out of being able to talk about this is if you're in a situation where you realize you're in a relationship, it could be a simple friendship or a work environment or something that's causing you to feel a way where you're lashing out at those people around you or people that are maybe trying to get close to you. Take a minute to take a step back and try and figure out why that is and where it's coming from. And you can be the one that breaks that cycle, just like you did with your dad,
Yep.
So I think that's, if you get any takeaway from this, if anything we're saying kind of correlates to a situation you might find yourself in, like take a minute to take a break from it and take a step away from it and try and break that cycle. And, and it took a lot of guts because it's easy to, it sounds weird, but it's easy to keep hurting people,
For sure.
to just keep that cycle, it perpetuates. So,
I don't think there's always, in fact, I think more often than not, there's not an awareness to it. You don't really realize you're doing it. You're just kind of like,
right.
This is life. These are the rules that have been established. So I'm going to play by them. I remember when I was running a nightclub, I'd have a random girl come up to me and, you're going home with me tonight. What the hell? I don't know you. My boyfriend just cheated on me. I'm going to get back at him. So
I'm out.
Your boyfriend just cheated on you. So you want to sleep with a complete and utter stranger that I could be the biggest scumbag on earth. And that's going to make you somehow feel better about it. And I would get like side-eyed, like, oh, thanks for just ruining my entire plan here. But, it's just things like that are very kind of common sense to me. Like when you think about how dumb that is, how completely moronic that is, and I know tons of people that have done it. I know tons of people have done it.
I just would like to see that conversation happen in real life.
Yeah, and it wasn't a one and done. I mean, it was a conversation.
I'm sure.
It happened a lot, and you're just like I was just in my brain, okay, so how does that help your situation? And so now you got a random tight end there. And like I said, they don't know me. So I'm a complete scumbag. So you wake up the next morning, you just had a random. The guy's a shithead or the girl's a shithead. And you're like, all right, not only just do this, but this person's a complete scumbag. Right. So now you have like the walk of shame to add to it.
Yep.
And then the hurt adds to it.
Right.
And, again, a lot of times that's how people react to stuff. Hurt people.
Well, and that's somebody being blunt and honest. So use your same situation, and male, female, don't care who it is, gets out of a relationship, pretends like they're okay. And instead of saying, hey, I just got out of a relationship, you and I are going to go back and see Netflix and chill, if you will. Instead, the comment is, I'm just looking for somebody to start the next step of my life. And it's a person that has no business ready to be out there. And you think you're going on that next date with somebody but it's somebody that's putting a facade on. That hurt person's going to hurt you because they're not vulnerable and ready to emotionally open up to you, and you may be fully ready to go all in.
Right.
And this person doesn't know. Maybe this is the first time somebody like that's trying to be vulnerable, and you go to jump in and that person can't receive it because they've been lying to you the whole time. That hurt person really just hurt somebody else, right?
No doubt about it.
Yeah. And that's, again, and, my background in this topic is really, dating and relationships, and that I would see that time and time again. And even times where I was like, okay, this is it. This is where I am going to go, put everything aside. I am going to go all in. But that other person wasn't, thankfully wasn't ready, but the damage that was done, would set me back, and then you're kind of back in that role, and hurting people, it's not a malicious thing. I think it's just it's an easy thing, hurt people. So you just keep that train rolling.
Yeah, kind of like a learned behavior.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was going to say the exact same thing with learned behavior. Is I don't think that's something you can leave out when you're talking about this, because I hear a lot of people say, like, I don't understand how somebody could do that, or how somebody would think that was okay. Well, of course you can. If that's their upbringing, their way of thinking, and their family is all like-minded people, and that's what they're surrounded by, you're the outcast and you think different, not them. So you can't hold people accountable. I mean, you've been talking to me about this for years. You can't hold people on things that you hold yourself to a standard, because they may not. So if I have myself set up where, hey, I would never do this, like, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example that would be something silly that would mean so much to me, but not somebody else. But it's just, that's how I was brought up, and we don't take into account that we all come from different strokes, different folks, right? So you just got to keep that in mind when people are acting a certain way. It may be normal, but it affects people differently for sure.
Yeah, and what I would say is, I mean, I could definitely hold you accountable.
For sure.
I can't expect it. So there's a huge difference there. And that's kind of what I'm talking about, is accountability is completely different than expectation.
Yeah, you're right.
Expecting somebody to act a certain way in a certain circumstances is one thing. Holding somebody accountable is a whole other.
Fair enough.
So, you can't expect every relationship to be open and honest and integrity, and you both have the same wants and needs. You can have accountability to that. And that's kind of like my point earlier to my old man or anybody else, that
it's true.
There has to be accountability. I mean, that's where, just like with Jesus to Peter, there was accountability there.
Right.
This is what I'm here for. This is what I was created for. This is going to happen. Either you're with me or get behind me.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I think that's where people, when I talk to people, which constantly happens, that are in toxic relationships, that's usually the glue there. that they care about the person. I mean, it can be in an abusive relationship. It could be a physically abuse. I mean, we'll all sit there and see girl come in with a black eye, and you're like, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
What are you doing in that relationship? And without fail, you'll get but you don't see him, 95% of the time when he's not beating the shit out of me. He's wonderful. And again, it's that I really love this person. I really care about this person. Hurt people. So I have empathy for this person. They had a messed up, their dad did the same thing to them, or their mom did the same thing to them, or whatever traumatic event happened in their life. So you have that empathy, and that empathy makes you want to, and like I said, where it becomes real important with faith and religion is we're taught that compassion, we're taught that empathy. It's kind of the core of what having faith is understanding that we're all human, we all make mistakes, we all sin. So you get tied into that, but then you forget that Jesus told Peter, "Get behind me, devil."
Right.
So, and again, it's not about casting judgment. It's not about expectation. It's about accountability.
Right.
It's about saying that this is where you are, this is where I'm at. I'm not going to accept that.
Well, it's kind of a way to hold people accountable.
For sure it is.
Yeah, right.
For sure it is. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people beat themselves up over that. We're all guys that if we love somebody, we'll go through a brick wall for them. We kind of pride ourselves on that. I'll do anything for this person. The problem becomes that becomes toxic. Because you're so willing to prove your love, and I'll be here through anything, and no matter what, I'm here. That's bullshit, folks. Right. If you're in any kind of relationship like that, it's no bueno.
Especially if it's not reciprocated.
100%.
Facts.
100%. Yeah. Now, to your point, your marriage, my marriage, your marriage, when you're both there, and that's why you're married. I mean, that's why you did it. Yeah. And the key point with this and what becomes very difficult is in any relationship, in my marriage, yours, you're going to have those pain points where, you do have to work through it. The point being, you have to be able to understand that when it's unhealthy and when it's healthy.
Right.
So when shit gets real hurtful, it's time to walk away. Now, let's say it's a marriage. That doesn't mean get a divorce but it might be, I'm staying in a hotel for the next 2-3 days. You need to figure this shit out, think it through. Give me a holler when you're ready to have a healthy conversation about it, counseling, whatever the case may be, which happens all the time. I think the problem is people think you're going to change somebody.
Right.
And you're not.
No.
Unless that person wants that to happen, to
Correct.
Brad's point earlier. And it's a real fine line.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because, talking about this, you kind of just reflect on instances that have come up and where you're like, oh, okay. And again, for me, a lot of it was relationship stuff. And you realized, I was in a situation, I was in a previous marriage that ended very badly. And it was one of those, there wasn't a salvation there. There was no saving any of it. There was no, it was somebody that was a hurt person, and then their way of coping was lashing out and inflicting more hurt, which makes things super confusing when you're of that person of, I'm going to go through a brick wall for this.
Right.
And that was my point. The accountability, which you guys touched on, it really, I was unable to see it, much like, that, woman you talked about, 95% of the time he's great. Well, no, there's that 5% of the time that he's not. So you need to leave that situation. It takes that accountability. It takes in my case, it took you and, kind of opening my eyes to stuff. It takes, somebody stepping in. So maybe if you are listening to this and you have a friend that is kind of in a situation where they're involved with hurt people, and it doesn't have to be a significant other. It could be a family or a coworker or a boss or something. You as that friend need to kind of pull them aside and be like, hey, this is affecting your life in a way where you're now being kind of mean to other people because of what you're going through. So, there's a lot here, but if you can, whatever you can do to either make somebody accountable or to stop that cycle, like, definitely do it.
Well, and I would say, to your point of being able to step in and help people, in my experience, it's substantially easier to do that from like a 10,000 foot view. And the only way to really have that is, I feel like the closer you are to a person, the harder it is to see that that's what they're going through. So what I mean is if I know you really well, like one of you two, it would be very hard for me to necessarily pick up on that immediately, because I have that extra empathy because you're my boys. So I'm going to allow things to slide that if I didn't know somebody else, I'd let it go. And I think that's where it becomes doing the right thing, because it's always easy to do things for people that you care about. So in this situation, if we're talking about that 10,000 foot view being people that you might not know as well, that's where courage comes in, because now you're setting yourself up to be vulnerable, because you're not only helping somebody that you don't know, you're helping somebody that might not even want your help. And you're kind of bringing stuff like that to surface. So I think it's extremely important to recognize that you can make a difference, not just with your circle, but outside of that. And actually, I think it's easier in this situation to make a difference outside, only in the sense of being able to notice it and react to it quicker. And I'm not saying that, like, Brad, if you walked into a group of guys that you've never met before, you're going to come in and be like, hey, I noticed this dynamic between. No, it's usually that somebody and it's a, hey, I noticed this, or is so-and-so usually like that? And I think that's where we miss, right? That's where we typically miss.
And I think, again, accountability to expectation, that accountability still has to be there, because the more you're getting hurt, the more you end up being that hurtful person.
No doubt.
I mean, that's exactly why we're talking about it. So I think it's crucial to, one, and we talk about it all the time, communication, being honest, coming from a sincere place. If you're that person in an abusive relationship, and, me personally, you raise your hand once, I'm out. That's it. Now, again, doesn't mean I don't care about you, doesn't mean you're not important to me, doesn't mean that I may not love you, doesn't mean any of those things. It's just that's off the table for me. Now, you can call, we could be friends, we can be acquaintances, I'm just not going to be in a relationship with you.
Right.
And you got to be able to have those consequences, because at the beginning of this, like I said, the problem is that the more I realized with my dad, and I think we did talk about this somewhat recently, the tough love and Al-Anon.
Yes.
The more you allow that person to get away with it, the more they're going to do it. I think it's crucial in life to have consequences, because that's where, let's say you're that person who's abusive, and that one that got away, that might be the thing where they're like, you know what, I lost this great person in my life. I don't want to lose somebody like that again. I'm going to get my shit together. And you got to have enough self-awareness and self-respect to understand that I don't have to tolerate this. Doesn't make me a bad person. Doesn't mean I don't care. Doesn't mean I don't love. Doesn't mean any of those things. This is off the record. I'm not doing this. I'm not going to allow this in my life.
Right.
I think for me, I created boundaries, good boundaries, and like you said, with those boundaries came communication of like, I'm this way because I went through X, Y, and Z.
Right.
And you have to do that as a person, and that allows you to grow and also be aware to never get into a situation where you're getting hurt by somebody to the point where you want to lash out at other people.
Right.
And it really takes.
Or yourself.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or you're beating yourself up over it.
That's another.
Or
good
self-destructive.
topic. Yeah. Self-destruct kind of goes into this. You'd be aware enough that other people are hurting you and astute to not want to lash out at people, but internally you're just really beating yourself up super hard. And that's where faith comes in, and being able to kind of, recognize that and saying a prayer or doing something, finding something to relieve that inner turmoil.
Definitely. Yeah, because that's where, in my mind, if my dad loved me enough, he would stop drinking. That was just the reality of it.
Right.
So all I had to do is prove how much I love him, and if he loves me enough, he's going to stop.
Yep.
That's where that self-destructive, that hurtful part, all that stuff, it just becomes toxic for you. And like I said, well, that's my dad, so I'm going to do whatever I got to do. And I did some crazy shit for him. You just can't put yourself in that situation, and you have to be honest with yourself to understand that that's just wrong.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what somebody went through. So, some guy, some girl was abused when they were young, slapped around, God forbid, whatever, and they're slapping you around. That's unacceptable.
Right.
Not going to allow that.
Right.
When you figure that out and you want to talk about it, more than happy to have a cup of coffee with you, but not going to allow that. And that's where it's going to stay. I'll be a friend, I'll be an acquaintance, not going to be in a toxic relationship.
Those are those boundaries.
Correct.
Yes.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And like I said, quite honestly, I think more often than not, that's where that person learns. Alex talked about some time ago. There was a time where we had a conflict and drew the line in the sand because I knew for me that's where it had to be.
Right.
And he learned from that. I could have went the other way where we never talked again.
Yeah.
It was like a week, 2 weeks.
It was a while. It was definitely a minute.
Which I know it's a week or two, but you have to understand, we worked in the same building. We saw each other every single day, and we're on the phone like for an hour every day after work talking about the shit we just went through to just 2 weeks of just didn't make eye contact. Everybody was afraid to be anywhere near either one of us. Yeah, no, you drew the line in the sand, and
now you guys got matching hats.
Well, it was a 2 week
Definitely,
thing.
wait, time out. Definitely not matching.
I got like 5 minutes left to bring I like my fucking hat. Go on YouTube, and it's a dope hat.
Hey, buddy,
it's great
hurt people.
Yeah,
I don't know what you're getting hurtful for.
And it was kind of, but so here's the difference is when we did it, and I didn't recognize it in the moment, I was able to notice that what you were doing, though, had a purpose. It wasn't something that because we weren't talking and we had a dynamic. We were the catalyst of that store. So the whole store felt when we weren't firing together. The company felt it out of that store. And he never made it to a point where it was malicious. So I wouldn't walk by his office and he would be like, "You done being a fucking idiot yet?" There was no antagonistic anything. It was, we went through some shit. It was very matter of fact. And you could tell that there was an opportunity for redemption. Now, he drew a line in the sand, but I never felt like he closed that door. I was pissed, was angry as shit. How could you? How dare you? And the silence is what I needed, because then you have 2 weeks to think about it. And okay, well, why did he? Now, him as a mentor, him as a leader in that situation, where I feel like you gotta not be careful, but where that could go the other way is if you draw that line before you show your intentions. So you draw that line too early before you've earned the trust of the person that you're trying to help grow, which you may be okay with this because it might just be toxic. You got to cut ties. You're going to ruin that relationship regardless. So it's always a better bet to go that route, because if it's toxic, and you're unable to see that intent anyways, it's better to just cut ties before it makes things worse for you. I guess in that situation, I was just lucky enough that the time that the line had to be drawn, I was 4 years in, so I had gotten enough growth where I could be self-reflective,
Well, and I think ultimately that's really the key thing with this is that if that person is at that point where they're ready for that evolution, they're ready for that growth,
right?
Just as Peter was, get behind me, Satan. Peter didn't go anywhere. I mean, he was there the next day. He was there in the next verse.
Right.
That was where Peter understood that, okay, I have to accept that this is what's going to happen.
Right.
And he's important enough to me where I want to be there. That happened several times to Peter, by the way, the shunning him 3 times. And, it's not like that just ended there. I would say the key from this is, one, having compassion, empathy, understanding that it's not me, it's not something I'm doing, I didn't deserve this, it's not, something from something. This person's been hurt in the past and they're hurting me. I just happen to be in the line of fire. Because a lot of times, too, we could blame ourselves for this.
Yep.
I deserve this in some way or whatever.
Right.
I would say that's step number 1 with it. So have that empathy. Understand that, okay, what is this putting me in? Am I hurt? Is this becoming toxic? Am I starting to become self-destructive by being in this situation? And if you're at that point, that's where you have to be at. Get behind me, devil.
Right.
I love you, or I care about you, or you're important to me, or I would like to have you in my life. I'm not going to be in this situation. I would love for you to continue in the friendship, relationship, marriage, whatever the case may be. I'm willing to work with you in whatever way, shape, or form we need to in order for that to happen. Anything short of that, I'm not tolerating this. Right. When you figure that out, I'll be here. Can't promise you in what capacity, but I'm more than happy to have that conversation.
Right.
Might be a conversation on continuing a relationship, might be as an acquaintance for your next relationship, whatever that may be. Because, again, we all have to understand consequences. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody in a great relationship, didn't realize it, screwed it up, got their shit together, and person B moved on. They found something better, found greener pastures. And party A is like, oh, shit, I lost that. Sometimes that puts that party A back into a backspin again, and I finally got it together and I lost this, because again, we're not honest with ourselves. We have to be able to say that happened because of my actions, and these are the consequences of those actions. Sucks, super hurtful. I don't want that to happen again, so I'm not going to do that again. But again, we kind of get in this cycle of hurt people. So, it's kind of where I leave off from my viewpoint. I don't know if there's anything else you guys want to add.
No, I think just, your points are good. I think just recognizing where you are at in that cycle, or somebody is in that cycle, and then, either internally, finding a way to kind of stop it, or reaching out to somebody, or you can reach out to us too. You can comment on these videos anytime. You can, find us on any of the social medias, and reach out if you feel like this is a point where you're at, or you're in that hurting cycle, and you're not sure what the next steps are. Reach out. I'd be happy to talk to you and help you through it.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Again, please share, like, and thank you guys again.
Thank you.